I ranked all 85 non-heavy exotic weapons into a tier list for Destiny 2 PvP. These weapons have been evaluated based on performance, the strength of their exotic perks, and their potential to excel in all Crucible modes. We begin with the F tier. These are weapons that are exceptionally bad due to having poor exotic perks and low stats, and they are generally not worth using under any circumstances, unless you find them fun. Starting off with Delicate Tomb, this is a rather odd-looking fusion rifle that shoots in a horizontal line when hip-firing, but it becomes a vertical line when aiming. The horizontal line also has 7 extra bolts added in, but the weapon spreads them out so much that it has a maximum range of about 2 inches. It has some perks that generate lightning and traces, but they are nearly useless in PvP. This weapon is like a legendary fusion, but worse, so I'm afraid it is not worth your exotic slot. Kind of like Hierarchy of Needs, an extremely unique solar bow that can summon these awesome rings onto the map. When you fire arrows through the rings, they will summon tracking projectiles to chase down the enemy players. Sounds great in theory, but in practice these tracking arrows deal almost no damage and they almost always miss. Even though the arrows have tracking, players easily outmaneuver some or all of these arrows without even trying. And also, since the rings don't move around with you, you are required to stand still in order to use them. This is no secret to your opponents, and once they see the ring, you become extremely predictable and easy to defeat. I really want to like this weapon because it looks amazing and the concept is super cool, but unfortunately it just feels completely unusable and clunky. You need to be an extremely talented player to have any level of success with this weapon, and even then, you'll quickly realize that it's nothing special. But something that is special is your health. And I know statistically, most people have pretty terrible eating habits, like eating too much junk food, expensive takeout, or just skipping meals. Drink Control is the solution to all of these bad habits because it's a meal replacement protein drink for people like us. It's known for tasting amazing and also having good stats. As you can see here, it has very high protein, almost no sugar, low calories, tons of fiber, and all of the other nutrients and stuff your body needs. It also has the perfect balance between flavor and nutrition to ensure it tastes good and it's good for you. It's very filling and is low on calories, so if you've been wanting to lose weight, this is perfect for you. If you've watched my main channel, you know I partnered with Drink Control last year, and well, 6 months later, here I am still using their products, and they're part of the reason I'm healthier than I've ever been. I've been very impressed with their products, and I love that they're fast and easy for when I'm just busy and not in the mood for cooking an elaborate meal. Their flavors are awesome. Just look at all of these different options you get to choose from. You might also want to throw in some protein meal bars and protein cookies that will keep you full on the go. Here's a tip. You should definitely use the bundle builder on the website because the more things you add, the higher your discount becomes. And then you can also stack my code SHADOW on top of that for an additional 10% off. Seriously guys, go check out Drink Control. It tastes really good and it's good for you. Click my link below or visit your local GNC store. Thanks to Drink Control for sponsoring, and now let's move on to the Verglass Curve, the next exotic in our tier list. You can load a bunch of stasis arrows on the Verglass Curve and then hipfire to unleash a massive volley of stasis projectiles and spawn a group of crystals. The only problem is this will rarely happen, because in order to get these stasis arrows, you'll need to land several final blows. And when you do manage to do this, it's not like a few stasis crystals are going to be super powerful and make you win the game. On the bright side, this bow does slow players down on impact, making it marginally easier to finish them off as they try to retreat to cover. It's more interesting to use it in PvE, much like Divinity. This is an arc trace rifle with an exotic perk that surrounds the target in a massive crit bubble, making it basically impossible to miss them. This can be nice for hitting people slightly around the corner as they try to escape, but overall this is a very niche application that very rarely comes into play. By the time you've dealt enough damage to create the bubble, the target is nearly dead anyway, making the bubble essentially a non-factor. This exotic takes a hilariously long 1.13 seconds to eliminate a Guardian, which is way worse than every other trace rifle, so it's not a difficult decision for me to rank it here in the F tier. The fourth horseman has 2 main exotic perks that make it fire extremely fast, and each shot will also deal more damage. The whole idea is that it fires super fast so that you can quickly delete people with 2 or 3 shots. It does actually take 2 or 3 shots though. The weapon has an extremely poor range stat and it will never one-shot unless you happen to be literal inches from your opponent. The high rate of fire can make it an okay option for taking out supers like Bubble, but there are other exotics that do a much better job at that. Since it usually requires multiple shots to deal a final blow, this weapon uses ammo extremely inefficiently, making it very easy to run out. Special ammo certainly isn't as common as it used to be, so this weapon has taken a hit over the years. Kind of like Dead Messenger, a wave-frame grenade launcher that unleashes 3 waves upon contact with the ground. The angle of these waves is extremely wide, so it's kind of hard to miss with this weapon. As a trade-off though, it barely deals any damage. In fact, it deals 85 damage, leaving Guardians with a decent chunk of their shields remaining. In the past, it used to be incredible because it dealt much more damage, but nowadays there are definitely better options out there. This weapon also relies on your opponents being on the ground so that the waves can hit them, so it's very easy to counter this weapon by simply jumping in any direction. It's a similar story for Xdirus, a grenade launcher that is very obviously not built for the Crucible. Its main perk causes it to become enraged when dealing or taking sustained damage, which will basically never happen in a PvP environment. Additionally, it has a special perk that makes the magazine continuously reload itself, completely eliminating the need for manual reloading. This sounds incredibly overpowered, but when you realize how little damage it does, it becomes a lot less appealing. Since the projectiles from this weapon also have the velocity of a two-toed sloth, your opponent will literally be dodging your shots by accident. You are more likely to misadventure than you are to land a single hit with this weapon. So perhaps the only positive thing to say here is that it has a nice reload speed. Vexcalibur is an awesome looking glaive that fires off a spread of projectiles, and blocking grants an overshield to you and nearby allies. If you can manage to chain an overshield, it's quite nice, but otherwise the shield drains very quickly and it's not exactly an exceptional glaive. At best, it's fun and gimmicky, and at worst, it's a total waste of your exotic slot. Wishkeeper is a bow with some interesting potential for strand synergy. It will deal bonus damage against suspended targets, so if you use it with your Hunter Dive, you'll be able to one-shot. However, since bows have a draw time, it doesn't really make any sense to do a close-range strategy like this, and almost any other weapon would do a better job. Wishkeeper can be a decent pairing with grenades, like in this clip, but it sometimes doesn't one-shot, and this strategy is also very inconsistent. This weapon can also create strand traps, but unfortunately, these are completely useless. In fact, I'd argue that using these will actually make you perform worse. This is because deploying a trap will cause a total of 6 damage, and then you will still need to fire off 2 additional arrows in order to defeat a Guardian. You'll need to fire 3 arrows to get an elimination when every other bow in the game only needs 2. There aren't many examples of exotic perks actually making the weapon worse, but this is one of them, and it definitely deserves a spot here in the F tier. Perhaps the coolest looking sidearm in the game also joins us here in the lowest tier, even though it is very exotic. Buried Bloodline is a special ammo sidearm that reminds me a bit of the Forerunner because it can also hit targets from very, very far away. However, when used at very long ranges, the projectiles will almost always vanish into thin air, making it clear that this weapon was meant to be used in relatively close quarters. Under perfect conditions, it can 2-tap and absolutely delete an unsuspecting Guardian, but you won't be able to pull this off most of the time. This weapon gets flinched extremely hard, it has questionable registration, and the travel time on the projectiles makes it nearly impossible to line up your shot on a moving target. It's also very prone to running out of ammo, so it requires a steady infusion of special ammo bricks if you want to keep it going. On the positive side, this weapon does very slightly heal you when it deals damage, and if you happen to get a triple down, it will heal you completely and also give you Devour. All things considered though, it's a pretty painful weapon to use in PvP, so I don't think I can rank it any higher than the F tier. With that said though, welcome to the E tier. This is a level for weapons that certainly aren't good, but they aren't completely unusable either. Many weapons in this category require a very strange playstyle, but if used correctly, they have a bit of potential to be good. If you're looking for a trace rifle that has quite a few tricks up its sleeve, the Navigator will do just that. If you fire at an ally, it will give both of you a special buff that reduces incoming body shot damage. Then you can just swap to your other weapon and push in with your teammate while taking reduced damage, which can definitely be pretty powerful. In terms of its own damage output, well, this trace rifle is about what you'd expect. Offensively, it doesn't do anything fancy, but its catalyst can allow you to deploy grapple points that can be used for aggressive movement. This gives it some great synergy with strand builds, especially if you're on a hunter. It's a fun support role, but since the woven mail buff only reduces body shot damage, it's not the most viable option against good players who are hitting headshots. Trinity Ghoul fires an arrow that splits into 3 different arrows, but aiming down sights and fully drawing the bow both decrease the spread. With the catalyst, all final blows cause it to become electrified, making the next arrow create chain lightning. Especially if you stack a damage bonus on top of this, Trinity Ghoul can be a very solid option for zapping people who stand too close together in 6v6. It is also super fun in momentum control. However, this bow is extremely bad for 3v3 modes, and since these rankings are based on the overall Crucible, I don't think I can rank this one higher than the E tier. Symmetry is a scout rifle that fires in full auto and can swap to Arc Seeker mode. Arc Seekers track towards combatants you target. Basically, you want to charge this thing up by getting some precision hits, and then swap to Arc Seeker mode where you can just 2-tap people without even aiming. Although this is pretty powerful, the default state of this weapon really sucks and has a subpar range stat of only 30, so I'm afraid it doesn't qualify for any of the higher tiers. I was originally expecting to rank Final Warning higher on this list, but after testing it a lot, I was thoroughly disappointed. It can charge up and then absolutely delete people, but it has very limited range and it essentially feels like charging up a Bastion, except it takes even longer. And by the time you finally do charge it up, you still have to accurately track the target as you launch off all of the projectiles. To be fair, it's extremely satisfying and powerful when it works, but it takes a lot of skill, a lot of planning, and a very specific situation for it to work properly. In all other situations, it performs like a pretty mediocre sidearm with a pretty confusing sight. Wicked Implement is a 180 scout with some special stasis synergy. It slows targets that it hits, and you can reload the weapon by destroying a crystal and then collecting a shard. Unfortunately, neither of these perks are very significant, so it is essentially just a basic 180 scout with some pretty okay stats. It's decent, but honestly you'd be better off using almost any legendary scout rifle with a good roll. Coldheart was the first ever trace rifle in Destiny 2, and it was pretty exceptional at the time. But with there being many trace rifles nowadays, this thing just feels like a relic of the past. Its main exotic perk makes it deal more damage the longer it remains on target, but this doesn't really come into play in PvP as you're never on a single target for very long. Coldheart just doesn't compete and doesn't have any perks that substantially boost its performance. Lord of Wolves is a shotgun with the exotic perk Shrapnel Launcher. Fires a powerful short-range burst of solar damage. This shotgun can hit some pretty long ranges if you're accurate with it and remain on target for the entire burst. It has 2 different modes, but unfortunately you can't really tell the difference between them, and they both kind of suck. This weapon has been ridiculously overpowered on many different occasions, but nowadays it has been brought down to a pretty below average performance. Cerberus is one of the most bizarre exotics ever created. Its exotic perk says that it shoots erratic bullets from all gun barrels at the same time. The key word here is erratic. This weapon spread is so crazy that it feels inconsistent, even though the pattern is not random. Most people find this weapon frustrating to use and blame its short effective range for holding it back. Much like the Bastion, it does output a lot of damage if all shots land, but for the Cerberus that just doesn't really happen. Speaking of things that almost never happen, the class-specific glaives have abilities that you can only use after landing 4 ranged attacks in a row. The Titan one can make a bubble, which is actually pretty powerful for objectives, but don't mistake this for a normal Titan bubble because it is far less powerful. The Warlock Glaive produces a healing turret that will heal almost your entire health bar every few seconds. Lastly, the Hunter Glaive unleashes a crazy lightning explosion that will one-shot everyone nearby and also track targets. These abilities all look insanely cool and they can be quite powerful, but at the end of the day, these weapons are just glaives with the potential to very occasionally activate a cool ability. They each have their strengths and weaknesses in terms of their stats and abilities, but overall you will rarely see anyone use these in the Crucible. Much like Skyburner's Oath, a scout rifle that shoots fast and straight when aiming, but lobs explosive slugs when hip-firing. It has been reworked several times, but the community has basically just decided that it's a meme weapon. It's pretty unique, and I guess you could try it with a solar build, but it's not going to win you any trips to the lighthouse. If you like basketball, you might enjoy Ruinous Effigy, a trace rifle that lets you literally dunk on your opponents. Its exotic perk transforms defeated guardians into void balls that you can pick up and slam onto your opponents. The fun factor is definitely here on this weapon, and I'd argue it's the most fun of any weapon in this tier. Sadly though, because the range of the dunk is extremely short, it's not really all that effective. You can also use the basketballs to reduce incoming damage, but then you're obviously occupied doing that and you can't really fight back. Ruinous is a very entertaining and fun weapon to use, but I can't really rank it any higher since neither the weapon nor its perk is very effective. The D tier is where things start to get much more interesting. The weapons in this tier offer compelling exotic perks that can actually be fairly effective if used correctly. Unlike some of the weapons in the lower tiers, you'll be able to find reasonable success when using these weapons. For example, Osteostriga is a craftable SMG that can be effective, but it also has some significant weaknesses. It fires a stream of sentient, toxic projectiles that track the targeted enemy. The tracking is rather aggressive, I might add, and it'll probably reward you with some headshots that you did not earn. It also has Toxic Overload, a perk that makes poisonous bursts that spread to nearby targets. This weapon looks, sounds, and feels incredible, and from that standpoint, I think it's one of the coolest weapons in the game. From a more analytical PvP perspective though, its projectiles travel so slowly that you will often find yourself in very awkward situations. Once you fire off a volley, you kind of just have to sit there and wait for the projectiles to reach the enemy while they absolutely blast you. The travel time means that you'll never get off the first shot in any engagement, and this matters quite a bit considering how strong the flinch is in this game. However, you can find some success if you launch off your projectiles and then quickly retreat to cover while they travel to the target. Izanagi's Burden has the perk Honed Edge. Consume the magazine and load a round with additional range and damage. This can be useful for consuming a large amount of bullets and one-shotting people to the body, but ultimately this requires you to consume 4 bullets just to get a single final blow. It has the same problem as the Fourth Horseman, where you need to use a lot of ammo on each engagement. The low stats and awkward reticle make Izanagi difficult to use, and other than its ability to body shot, it doesn't have any other exceptional perks that make it stand out. I do enjoy shooting the toes sometimes, but this is far from the best sniper on this list. Touch of Malice is the classic King's Fall scout rifle. The final round in the magazine deals bonus damage, and the final round will never disappear, so you can fire forever. These special final rounds come at a hefty price though, as they cause the weapon to deal massive self-damage. When you're damaging yourself and an enemy is shooting back at you, it's pretty common to get destroyed in just a fraction of a second. On the other hand though, if you catch someone not looking at you, it's great, because the extra damage will let you defeat them faster without any downside. I honestly really like this weapon and it feels good to use in a more casual environment, but it's hard to get over the fact that the self-damage makes you an easy target. I'd probably rank it several tiers higher if it wasn't so punishing, but for now I think this is a fair place for it to be. If you want to shoot off thousands of bullets and never stop firing, Sweet Business is calling your name. Featuring a massive magazine, solid hipfire accuracy, and plenty of explosions, this weapon is absolutely devastating once it ramps up to maximum rate of fire. Most people underestimate the sheer melting potential that this thing has, and it can be a blast in 6v6 modes. Many people think they can challenge a Sweet Business user, but then they just get deleted in under 0.6 seconds. The drawback though is this weapon struggles during the time it is ramping up to its maximum rate of fire, taking an extremely long 1.2 seconds to get a final blow. Unfortunately, it's really easy for others to outplay you before you reach max RPM, and it's so loud that your opponents can hear it from across the entire map. This makes it pretty easy for people to just listen and wait for you to stop firing before taking an engagement. It's great fun in chaotic environments and can definitely catch people off guard, but it's not going to be the most competitive in high-end 3v3 modes. Next up is Bastion. This weapon fires in bursts and is capable of outputting a devastating amount of damage in close range. Bastion will obliterate any super in the game, but it kind of struggles in the range department. Since it has a charge time and often takes 2 or 3 bursts to take out a full health guardian, it can be hard to justify using given its very limited range. On the bright side, the fact that it does 3 bursts does make it very forgiving, because if you accidentally miss the first one, you can still course correct and land a final blow. Some of you may remember when this thing ruled the Crucible, but it has settled down to a somewhat reasonable level of power due to various updates. Riskrunner has the perk Arc Conductor. When taking arc damage, this weapon becomes more powerful and resists incoming arc damage. Granted, you definitely will not be taking arc damage in every engagement, but when you do, this weapon feels amazing. It chains lightning all over the place and gives you nearly infinite ammo, making it amazing for big streaks. It used to also give you a 50% damage resist and let you have incredible hero moments, but sadly this weapon was hit with a devastating nerf. It now only protects you from 15% of damage, making the resistance almost not noticeable. You'll still have a marginal advantage against opponents using an arc primary weapon, but with so many different elements and also kinetic weapons to choose from, your odds of going up against a bunch of arc primaries aren't very high. Prometheus Lens is a trace rifle that fires a solar trace beam and creates a damaging heat field around the target. Visually, this looks absolutely awesome, but unfortunately it kind of makes it hard to see what you're doing. It has another perk that refills the magazine, but this only comes into play when you're going on streaks and have enough ammo to even have anything in reserves. Prometheus is pretty fun to use, but overall it's not incredibly special, and Wavesplitter is in a similar situation. Wavesplitter has a bit more going on though, because it oscillates between 3 power levels that deal different amounts of damage. If you happen to pick up an orb, you'll also get a brief period of maximum damage. Overall, the oscillating power modes are really cool, but they don't really have that much of an impact on the weapon's performance. They all deal similar amounts of damage and don't exactly have a notable impact on gameplay, but I will say that this weapon has pretty solid stats. Ariana's Vow is normally a hand cannon that players either love or hate. It's a special ammo hand cannon with enormous recoil and a scope for extremely long range. With high zoom and its use of special ammo, this thing feels more like a sniper rifle than a hand cannon. Most people will use it to deal a big chunk of damage and then switch to their primary to deal the final blow. A damage buff with this weapon can let you one-shot with it, but overall that's fairly rare and you'd probably be better off just using a sniper. In many ways, it feels like this has the disadvantages of a sniper without the advantages of a hand cannon, making it rather difficult to use. Moving on to the C tier, these weapons are the middle-of-the-road exotics. They are not bad by any means, and they will serve you well in a variety of situations. The exotic perks are good, but they just aren't super exceptional quite yet. Mida Multi-Tool might define this tier the best, since it's an all-around very solid weapon. It provides faster movement speed, and its perk grants radar while aiming. It also has no distractions via its catalyst, reducing the flinch and making it ideal for competitive long-range duels. You'll also be dishing out extra flinch against your opponent due to the inclusion of high-caliber rounds in this weapon's perk pool. If you're facing off against another scout or pulse, both of these things give you a bit of an edge and you'll have a pretty good chance of coming out on top. Polaris Lance is in a pretty similar situation, but it has a very different vibe to it. Being a slower firing archetype, it's much more methodical and each shot matters quite a bit more. If you land 4 precision hits, it'll load a big explosive round into the mag, making for some fun fireworks on your next shot. This is relatively powerful and can lead to an occasional collat, so overall no complaints there. Unfortunately though, this weapon has kinda bad stats and they are much worse than a scout rifle coming later in this list. Featuring only 39 aim assist, it doesn't feel particularly sticky or forgiving on any input device. Arbalest was the first of its kind as a special ammo linear fusion rifle. Following its introduction, it quickly rose to the top of the meta since it received very little flinch and had generous aim assist. It has since received a ton of nerfs though, making it far less powerful in the present day. It can still be a decent option if you're accurate and really good with pre-charging. It doesn't really have any special perks other than it being a linear fusion rifle that uses special ammo, but it is good at one-shotting supers. I would rank it a lot higher if it had an interesting exotic functionality, but for now it just feels like an objectively worse version of Lorentz Driver. Tiku's Divination is actually surprisingly good if you play to its strengths. It launches off multiple tracking projectiles when you fire from the hip. If you then follow that up with a regular shot, it causes a massive explosion that is super fun. The hipfire mode of this weapon just has absurdly strong tracking, and you can literally just spam fire it and tag the entire enemy team. In some cases, you can even do this around a corner. Smart players, though, will notice that they've been primed by this bow, and then they'll just hide in cover and wait for the debuff to expire. Although this is a very unique and fun weapon to use, there's definitely a couple bows coming up that have some more compelling exotic features. Hard Light has the ability to cycle between Arc, Solar, and Void, which doesn't exactly matter in PvP. However, it does get special bonuses depending on which element you choose. For example, Arc mode is fantastic because you will have a wild 100 handling, 100 stability, and 100 aim assist. Even at 100 stability though, it still bounces a lot for controller players. It also has the Volatile Light perk. Rounds fired from this weapon have reduced damage falloff, overpenetrate targets, and ricochet off hard surfaces. Projectile damage increases after bounce. This is super fun for priming targets around corners and also extremely useful for preventing their health regeneration. It's not going to be your favorite dueling weapon of all time, but when you're using it, the unique perks and ricochet make you really stand out. This is the opposite of Rat King because its entire goal is to help you blend in. You'll go invisible if you reload after a final blow and also immediately start regenerating your health. Rat King's exotic perk causes the weapon to be more powerful when nearby allies are also using Rat King. Although it feels like a total meme, a full fire team of Rat Kings is definitely something different. It has a pretty high 80 aim assist and 100 recoil direction with its catalyst, making it a pretty good choice for anyone who enjoys aggressive sidearm gameplay. Monte Carlo's perk is the Monte Carlo method. Dealing damage with this weapon reduces your melee cooldown and grants a chance to fully recharge your melee ability with each final blow. In addition, melee final blows will give you tons of bonus damage with this weapon. This is a perfect pairing for many melee-focused builds like throwing knives, and the bonus damage can really melt people once you get going. It's not a top choice for 3v3, but you can really go off with it in 6v6. There's really nothing to dislike about this weapon, but I suppose it's not the most flashy or exotic offering out there. The Manticore, on the other hand, has a lot of crazy stuff going on. This is an SMG with several airborne-focused perks that make its gameplay extremely unique. Dealing damage while grounded charges it up, and then dealing damage in the air makes you float around and not fall towards the ground. It's also optimized for this use case because it gets bonus damage when in the air. Unfortunately, this exotic often makes you feel very overextended while floating and making use of the exotic perks. There are many times in gameplay where the floating features just leave me completely exposed, so as you can see, it's a very high-risk playstyle when facing multiple opponents. When grounded though, it's definitely above average with some pretty high stats compared to other competitors. Tessellation is one of the newer additions to our arsenal, featuring a damage type that changes to match whatever subclass you have equipped. This makes it unique because you can conceivably have 3 stasis weapons simultaneously and create some interesting builds for bonus damage. The main synergy with this weapon is with grenades. Final blows will recharge your grenade, and you can also sacrifice your grenade to load a massive explosive shot into the weapon. There is no question that this is one of the coolest animations and sounds of any weapon to exist ever. Unfortunately though, this special mode is a little disappointing in gameplay. You still have to charge up your shot like a regular fusion, and then the grenade projectile travels rather slow and doesn't really track onto enemies. It's almost like Jotun, except worse. You kinda have to use it in close range if you want it to hit, and if you're doing that, you might as well just use your normal fusion mode to save your grenade. All around, this is a great fusion in its regular mode, it can reach pretty far, and it's always great to get your grenade back from final blows. If you want a unique gameplay loop, look no further than Centrifuge. This auto rifle gets charged up and reloaded when sprinting, and then final blows while charged will unleash explosions and blindness upon your enemies. If you love running around a lot, you'll probably find this perk to feel pretty natural and complementary to your playstyle. The same can also be said for Tommy's Matchbook, a weapon that many people seem to not really understand. Tommy's is great for fast-paced gameplay because it has high hipfire accuracy and a massive magazine. It also becomes overheated, dealing extra damage but burning the user. It's pretty lethal at base as it takes people out in just 0.77 seconds, but it becomes extremely deadly when overheated. This is great for combating supers because you'll have a massive damage output and it doesn't really matter if you burn yourself a little. However, it suffers from the same weakness as Touch of Malice. It's easier to defeat a Tommy's Matchbook user if they do half the work for you by taking down their own shield. Overall, this is a pretty fun weapon to use and it has a lot of potential if you can hipfire it accurately. Aegir's Scepter starts off with a very boring perk that generates a slowing burst around the target on final blows. However, it gets a lot more interesting when you apply the Catalyst, which allows you to sacrifice your super to put this weapon into overcharge. It completely annihilates everyone while doing this. You can go on some absolutely insane sprees and nobody will stand a chance against you, but you have to ask yourself if it's really worth sacrificing your super. I love that it has this flashy and powerful perk setting it apart from other trace rifles, and this has earned it a place a little higher on the list. And on that note, we are moving higher on this list ourselves as we now enter the B tier. These weapons are firmly above average, and I'd even describe them as noteworthy in many instances. You will often encounter these in the Crucible, and in the right hands, they can be a dominant force in any match. Necrochasm really impressed me during my extensive playtest with it. I'm not normally a huge fan of auto rifles in this archetype, but Necrochasm just feels completely different. It has very impressive stats, including a wild 94 stability, 76 reload speed, and 85 aim assist. This weapon will absolutely dominate in the hands of a skilled player, as it heavily rewards headshots with big Cursed Thrall explosions. Additionally, if you reload afterward, you'll enter an insane mode where you get 900 RPM, bonus stability, and bonus aim assist. Imagine Desperado, except way better. You also get the Outlaw perk on this weapon, making it reload crazy fast for going on long sprees. There's something just so attractive about exotics that become mega powerful after you fulfill their mini gameplay loop. It's definitely a weapon that excels more in 6s than it does in 3s, but this is a solid choice for any mode, and the satisfaction that you get from the gameplay loop is second to none. Witherhoard creates blights all over the ground, and I'm sure you know how easy it is to accidentally get stuck in one of these annoying circles of suffering. This exotic is excellent for zoning off areas of the map, forcing people out of cover, and also off of zones. When you place it on a zone, it will force the opponent to retreat and take damage, and then you can easily clean them up with another weapon. It's one of the best weapons for any mode that has an objective, whether that's Iron Banner or a zone in Trials of Osiris. Witherhoard can also stick directly onto opponents and take out any super in the game, but due to the amount of time it takes to do so, this option often also results in a trade. Even so, a good Witherhoard user can be extremely devastating and really give the opposing team a hard time. Jotun is the toaster exotic, and it launches tracking projectiles that explode and burn on impact. This weapon is extremely easy to use at low levels of play as it has generous tracking. New players will find it works great right out of the box, and it's a solid option even for experienced players. However, due to the travel time and the long charge time, it isn't super competitive in the highest ranks of PvP. With that said, it's annoying for anyone to play against, and it can sometimes even track players behind cover as they run away in terror. It's one of the most popular weapons in the game, and I would be lying if I said it wasn't effective in most PvP matches. Trespasser is an arc 3-burst sidearm with some very high potential perks. Reloading after a final blow gives you a powerful super burst, and then final blows with the super burst give you even more super bursts. This is incredibly powerful because this can one-shot and absolutely delete anyone within range. Overall, it's a very fun weapon to use, and it can be very strong if you're good with it, but it isn't the easiest weapon to use and frequently gets overshadowed by SMGs. Graviton Lance is somewhat unique as it is one of the only 2-burst pulse rifles in the game. It has developed a sort of fan club of dedicated Graviton enjoyers, which is a testament to this weapon's power fantasy and overall feel. Its main exotic perk causes enemy targets to detonate and spawn void projectiles that track targets. This is great for getting collaterals or at the very least damaging a second target to make them easier to clean up. Graviton also has a perk that makes its second shot deal more damage and have no falloff. It has been reworked and changed quite a bit in the past year, and after a brief time in the sun, it now sits comfortably in this tier. It's quite good, but I don't think anyone will argue that it's the best weapon in the game. Outbreak Perfected's main perk creates Siva Nanite Swarms. These are annoying for other players to deal with, and they'll help you by damaging any other guardians nearby. It's also unlike any other pulse rifle since it fires like a laser and has essentially zero recoil. This has always been a super solid weapon with basically no downsides, so there's really nothing else to say here. Telesto's main exotic perk is that projectiles attach to surfaces and detonate with a delayed void blast. Through all of the memes about Telesto breaking the game, the weapon has ended up in a pretty decent spot. It can reach really long distances if you're able to control the recoil and place the bolts tightly together. Like, take a look at this literal 40-meter range. This type of distance is unheard of for other fusion rifles. If you can consistently hit this range, you'll be pretty hard to counter in basically any situation. The one major downfall of Telesto though is the delay it has before the projectiles detonate. Even if you perfectly outplay your opponent and land all your shots, you'll still have to wait for the detonation, giving your opponent plenty of time to take you out. You'll end up trading a lot unless you perfectly use cover to mitigate this downside, but overall this is a decent exotic with some serious playmaking potential. If you're smart about it, you can also make some interesting plays with Lumina. Final blows with it create these little floating remnants, and then absorbing a remnant lets you buff yourself and an ally of your choosing. You'll be dishing out some healing, but more importantly, some bonus damage for both of you. Lumina's ability to provide bonus damage can set up some powerful combos, but it can be kinda awkward to do this. Especially if you're just playing with random teammates who don't know what you're trying to do, good luck finding them and getting them to stop so that you can hit them with this special buff. It's a great support weapon all around, and the hand cannon itself has solid performance. No big explosions on this one though. If you want that, you've got to look towards Malfeasance. Its main perk causes enemies to explode after 5 shots, and notably, those shots can be at any range. If you want to just sit in the back and tickle people for like 2 damage, you'll still blow them up after landing 5 shots from downtown. Considering this is a primary weapon, those explosions are pretty powerful and do a pretty good job of taking down guardians in a super. Explosions aside though, Malfeasance simply isn't the greatest hand cannon, and its 180 archetype isn't doing it any favors. Wishender's exotic perk provides the ability to see through walls while drawing the bow. This is valuable for all players, but those on the higher end of the skill spectrum will find it to be increasingly overpowered. Infinite wall hacks give you the ability to hit your opponents the instant they leave cover, effectively making you have faster reaction time than anyone else in the game. Seriously, I mean only cheaters will be able to get the first shot on you when you're using this weapon. Since it deals a solid chunk of damage, it's great for getting the first shot and then quickly cleaning up with your other weapon. But even if you don't like using the bow itself, the sheer amount of information provided by the wall hacks can give you a competitive advantage in something like Trials of Osiris. This exotic perk is among the most powerful on this entire list, but since the bow itself isn't exceptional, it doesn't quite deserve to be in the highest tiers. Deadman's Tale is a very unique lever-action scout rifle, and it's one of the only exotic weapons in the game that can roll or be crafted with random perks. There is infinite customization here. You could go for Vorpal Weapon to melt opposing supers, or even Moving Target for the bonus aim assist and strafe speed. Its exotic perk makes chaining precision hits grant bonus target acquisition and range. Once you unlock the Catalyst, Deadman's Tale becomes a hipfire monster, allowing you to strafe and hipfire really fast with amazing accuracy. Deadman's Tale used to be dominant for mouse and keyboard, but it has undergone several changes over the past couple years, and now it's fairly viable on any input device. Bad Juju is a full auto kinetic pulse rifle that seems pretty bad at first glance, but it has a very solid exotic perk. Its main trait refills the magazine, increases this weapon's damage output, and grants bonus super energy based on the number of final blows. This is amazing for sprees in 6v6, and who doesn't want free super energy? When you consider the catalyst that extends the exotic perk's duration, it can literally win you the game by helping you get your super before anyone else. It's worth noting that its archetype did get buffed, making it significantly more forgiving, and especially once you get the perk rolling, it's one of the most forgiving weapons on this list. You can hit quite a few body shots and still be rewarded with a nice clean 3-burst elimination. We are now in the A tier category. These weapons are great at base, their exotic perks are compelling, and most players will agree they are extremely effective. The weapons from here on out will dominate over all of the other weapons in the lower tiers. Vigilance Wing is a great example of such dominance, and with a compelling perk package and a 5-round burst, it's sure to deliver on any expectations you might have for an exotic pulse rifle. If you ever find yourself with really bad teammates, pull out the Vigilance Wing, because every time one of them goes down, it buffs your movement speed and regenerates your health. This actually comes into play more than you might think, and it will often happen just when you need it most. This weapon can eliminate Guardians in just 0.7 seconds, making it really dominant if you can track your target for the entire 5-round burst. Even if you hit body shots though, this is perhaps the most forgiving weapon in the entire game. One of the main downsides to this pulse is that its 5 bullets come out quite slowly, so you can't really peek shoot like you can with other pulses. Lastly, this weapon also has the perk Last Stand, which increases your weapon performance and health regeneration while you're the last Guardian standing. Again, this is awesome if your teammates suck. Overall, it's just an amazing exotic with great sights, and it will give you a clear view of your target. Sturm is a 120 hand cannon with all-around fantastic stats, making it a decent option even when 120 hand cannons aren't super popular. It has a unique interaction with a sidearm called Drang. Final blows with Drang overcharge Sturm, and these weapons also reload each other. If you stack any other type of damage boost on top of overcharge, Sturm can actually one-shot opponents, which is extremely powerful and satisfying. Sturm is generally a stat monster, and it's one of the few exotics that rank highly based on stats alone. If you want to make interesting plays with Drang, that's up to you, but you can absolutely use this hand cannon by itself and still find a lot of success. Merciless has an exotic perk that makes it charge faster after non-lethal hits, but honestly this perk is mostly just meant for PvE. The main PvP-centric perk is called Impetus, and it gives the weapon absurd levels of damage if you reload after a final blow. It will do up to 99 damage per bolt, meaning that especially if you stack it with any damage buff, you'll only need 2 bolts to take out any player. Make sure you're using the Catalyst with this thing though, because it gives an extremely massive boost to its range and stability. It's one of the most consistent fusions with one of the longest ranges out there, but it takes a skilled player to use this weapon well. You've got to manage your recoil, reload at the right times to get the buffs, and plan your movement properly during its lengthy 1-second charge time. It's an awesome weapon with a specific use case, and the same can be said about Borealis. This sniper can cycle between all of the different elements to get different bonuses, and these bonuses make it completely stand out from other snipers. Most notably, in Void mode, Borealis will get plus 10 aim assist and plus 20 stability, and in Arc mode, it will get plus 25 handling and plus 5 range. This means it can reach a ridiculous 100 handling while in Arc mode, which is unheard of for a high-impact sniper. When you look at its overall stat package, it's clear that Borealis is superior in every way to other high impacts. Sadly, its other exotic perk is not very relevant, but much like Sturm, the absurd stats make this weapon worth using. It does take a little while to get used to, but statistically you can't go wrong with Borealis. The Huckleberry's exotic perk increases rate of fire and recoil while you're holding down the trigger. Final blows reload a portion of the magazine. If you get the catalyst, final blows will entirely refill the magazine, so it just gets even better. It also has Rampage, which provides extra damage and pairs beautifully with the other perk for some long sprees with unlimited ammo. Huckleberry can secure a final blow in a very competitive 0.67 seconds, but unfortunately you do have to hit all headshots to achieve that speed. It's not the greatest weapon you've ever seen for 1v1 duels, but it has the perfect package to go on long sprees, and that's really its whole identity. When you keep that in mind, it does a great job at what it was built to do. Much like Fighting Lion, which was built to be the most annoying weapon you could possibly play against. This weapon is best when you deal a bit of damage with it and then switch to other weapons to clean up, and the Catalyst will help you do this by granting bonus accuracy and handling to that weapon. It can also be used around the corner to damage or even eliminate people who are in cover. In the hands of a good player, this weapon is insanely annoying to play against, and it has almost no counter. It can just spit out an endless stream of grenades that deal a pretty significant amount of damage while bouncing all over the place. Since primary ammo is infinite now, you can actually just spam this weapon forever. Considering its potential, some people might even want to rank it in the highest tier, but for me, I think a Fighting Lion fits just fine into the A tier. Forerunner is a super unique special ammo sidearm that's meant for very long range. It also rewards you with more accuracy and less recoil if you tap the trigger. Although this weapon is limited by the fact that it can easily run out of ammo, it feels quite powerful being able to 3-tap at sniper rifle range while using a sidearm. The aim assist feels very generous, and it is not hard to land your shots with this weapon. It's very fun to use, and it especially excels in 3v3 environments. As I hinted at earlier, Lorenz Driver is basically just Arbalest, except with tons of flashy perks added on top. The driver's main exotic perk generates these telemetry patterns on the ground. Picking up one telemetry pattern will grant ability energy, and picking up 3 telemetry patterns will grant this weapon bonus damage. In addition, you'll notice that the targets tend to implode, sucking in all nearby enemies and detonating a void blast. The Lorenz has perhaps the coolest sound design of any weapon in the entire game, and it's seriously a lot of fun to use in all Crucible modes. The void detonations are flashy and exciting, the aim assist is fairly sticky, and the bonus damage is a massive 50% buff that lasts for 30 seconds. After all of the nerfs, it now receives an absurd amount of incoming flinch and isn't particularly easy to use anymore, but man, if you're skilled enough to get the perk activated, you can just body shot everyone and nobody stands a chance. Quicksilver Storm is a 720 auto rifle and grenade launcher hybrid with some very high range and stability stats. When firing in auto rifle form, it will periodically release rocket tracers that home in on the target, but they can sometimes feel a little unreliable and they do take a while to travel to the target. After landing multiple rockets though, it can convert into a grenade launcher that does about 120 damage per hit. It notably one-shots Titan barricades and even Well of Radiance though, giving it some very big clutch potential. The same is true, but in a different way for Suros Regime, because the bottom half of the magazine deals bonus damage and it has a chance to return health and save you on final blows. And in clutch moments when the magazine is low, you'll just be dealing extra damage and taking people out even faster than usual. Additionally, it has 2 modes, spinning up, which increases the rate of fire while holding the trigger, and dual speed receiver, which grants more damage at the cost of a slower rate of fire. The decision here really comes down to the ranges you want to fight in, as both options are fairly decent. The Catalyst takes this auto from a 50 recoil direction all the way up to 100, making it feel quite a bit better to use. Great stats, great feel, nothing too flashy, but just a very classic and solid weapon all around. Have you ever wanted a fusion that has completely unlimited ammo? Well, Devil's Ruin is basically that, in addition to it being a sidearm. This fiery exotic's main perk lets you fire off individual shots or hold to charge a high-powered laser. The base form of this sidearm is fairly decent and ordinary, but the laser is pretty deadly, and if you time it just right, you can annihilate supers with it. It has surprisingly long range, but it kind of requires some planning and pre-charging to use optimally. With that said though, it's essentially a pocket fusion rifle that uses primary ammo, and you'll find that very few people expect to see it in the Crucible. It's a super fun exotic to use, especially for 6v6, and it has become even more powerful over the years with nerfs to fusion rifles and shotguns. Revision 0 is an awesome pulse rifle and sniper rifle hybrid. You build up energy by landing precision hits with the pulse rifle, and then you can swap over to it being a sniper. The sniper barely takes any flinch and feels incredible to use, and it even has perfect hipfire accuracy so you can just no-scope anyone at any range. It does take some work to charge up the sniper mode, but man is it rewarding when you do so. Revision 0 also has the option to switch between 4 burst and 2 burst modes, and both of these are fairly viable depending on your preferences. It's the only weapon in the game with 4 catalysts, and in addition to crafting, this lets us really customize it exactly how we want. Overall, Revision is a great pulse that truly feels exotic, and the sniper pulse gameplay loop is quite entertaining and fun. The Jade Rabbit's exotic perk has been changed many times recently, but it now rewards you with bonus body shot damage after landing some headshots. This is what I've always wanted out of this perk, because it makes the weapon more forgiving if you're accurate enough to chain some headshots. It is essentially rewarding precision with forgiveness, which makes it ideal for anyone with reasonably good aim. With a perfect recoil direction of 100 and the exotic catalyst bringing the stability up to 80, the Jade Rabbit is very controllable and it's very consistent when it comes to 3-tapping Guardians at long range. It also has 60 aim assist, making it statistically better than Polaris Lance in basically every category. The only downside to this archetype of weapon is it's not very forgiving, as it takes literally 2 full seconds to get a body shot final blow. Overall, it's a very consistent and intuitive weapon to use, and the incredible perks and solid stats make it the best exotic scout in the game. Collective Obligation impresses me more and more every time I use it. I absolutely love the sound and feel, and this weapon is just so powerful even without considering any of the perks. Its main loop involves leeching void debuffs and spreading them onto new targets. You need to play pretty intentionally with your void build in order to make use of this, but in theory it has a ton of potential. Like if you defeat a suppressed enemy, you can then just spread suppression to everyone you damage after that. Imagine the potential for clutch moments. As a nice little bonus, this weapon also reloads itself whenever you get a void buff like invisibility. My only gripe with this weapon is the sight can be a little bulky and obscure your vision, but overall it isn't really a big problem. I originally wasn't planning to rank this weapon so high, but its amazing base performance in combination with its high potential exotic functions has landed it a spot at the tail end of the A tier. But now it's time for the S tier. These weapons are some of the best in the entire game and they dominate over all of the competition. They have standout exotic perks, unbelievably high stats, and they don't have too many weaknesses to speak of. Hawkmoon is the first in this category, and it fits the description of exotic perhaps better than any other weapon. It comes complete with a fantastic stat package, a really special exotic perk, and an amazing selection of random perks to choose from. The exotic perk lets you charge up the weapon with headshots and then spend that charge on a final round to deal an insane amount of damage. It's not every day that you get to one-shot supers with a hand cannon. With the catalyst increasing the mag size, it's incredibly fun to run around PvP acquiring the buff, and then one-shotting people to the respawn screen with the final bullet in the mag. Hawkmoon starts off with great stats, but it gets even more handling, reload, and range with every headshot that you land. It really does go from great stats to unbelievable stats. With a super high 93 aim assist and the potential to roll with extremely good perks like Eye of the Storm, Moving Target, and Opening Shot, it's clear that Hawkmoon deserves its place here in the S tier. Another classic hand cannon you're probably expecting to see here is the Last Word, but it is a weapon that can perform very differently depending on what input device you use. When it first came out, it was powerful for mouse and keyboard players, but nowadays it's much more popular among controller players and it is difficult to use on mouse and keyboard. Its exotic perk makes it fire in full auto, and hipfire shots deal bonus precision damage while increasing reload speed and accuracy. Although it is full auto, I still recommend that most players pace their shots to go for maximum accuracy. This is because securing all headshots lets you defeat someone in a ridiculous 0.53 seconds, making it one of the fastest weapons in the entire game. An important thing to note is this weapon heavily depends on the performance of other weapons. For example, when SMGs are dominant, the Last Word has some pretty harsh competition. On the other hand though, it will excel in a hand cannon or pulse rifle meta, where it can be the clear winner in close range. Although it deserves a spot here in the S tier for controller players, it's not nearly as powerful for mouse and keyboard players, so it's going down in the C tier for that input device. Here's a weapon that is kind of flying under the radar. Cryosthesia 77K. It's a stasis kinetic sidearm with the exotic perk that lets you literally shoot out a freezing bolt and make enemies completely helpless. This sidearm is especially powerful in a situation like Rumble where you can freeze a target and then easily finish them off. With a crazy 93 aim assist, this sidearm is just pretty strong at base, but the exotic functionality really pushes it over the edge. Especially when you're facing people better than you, this freezing exotic perk can make a big difference. If they're frozen after all, they can't exactly fight back. This weapon isn't the most popular for Trials, but it's one of the very best for respawn-based modes. It's incredibly difficult and frustrating to play against, and if you can master the timing of the freezes, you will feel unstoppable. Another weapon that requires some mastery is Sunshot, because this thing has a ton of potential, but it's very difficult to use. It's the only 150 RPM hand cannon, meaning that it has a super fast 3-tap, but it has two big weaknesses that make this exceedingly difficult to pull off. The two shortcomings are aim assist and poor target visibility. With an aim assist stat of only 60, the Sunshot is not nearly as forgiving as other hand cannons, and the recoil animation plus all of the solar effects make it really difficult to see your target. It's not all negative though, because Sunshot deals explosion damage to flinch enemies, and it has a pretty long range due to the explosions not suffering damage falloff. Sunshot also has Sun Blast, which makes targets explode, and this can occasionally lead to some awesome looking collaterals. These are great perks to have, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to your ability to 3-tap with this weapon. For 99% of players, it is very difficult to consistently 3-tap every time while firing at 150 RPM. But if you can do it, this weapon will absolutely be incredible. Vex Mythoclast is a fusion rifle that fires like an auto rifle, and after getting multiple eliminations, it can be transformed into a linear fusion rifle. The auto rifle form did get nerfed and now fires slower, but it still has solid range and it's definitely not bad. It also has increased damage, accuracy, and stability after a final blow, so you can definitely get some chains going with just the auto rifle mode. The most exotic and exceptional thing about this weapon though is definitely the linear fusion mode. It has like no flinch, 14 million aim assist, and it makes Loren's driver look like garbage by comparison. And don't forget, it uses primary ammo. It's not particularly viable for something like Trials because you'll almost never get to activate the linear fusion mode, but it's a ton of fun for 6v6 and it absolutely dominates as a primary ammo linear fusion. Crimson has quite a few similarities to the Last Word when you really think about it. You may hear very good or very bad things about this weapon depending on who you ask and what input device you use. Its exotic perk will restore your health and reload the weapon, which is perhaps the most boring and yet desirable thing you could possibly ask for. This is literally perfect for going on extremely long streaks. It can't get any better than infinite ammo and infinite health regeneration. However, due to the extremely slow speed that the bullets fire from this weapon, you almost have to play like it's an auto rifle. You can't peek shoot, and it's not as effective for competitive 3v3. Controller players tend to love this weapon because the reticle friction helps us land all 3 shots in the burst, something that M&K players can struggle to do. It's also worth noting that Crimson feels very difficult to use on anything higher than 95 FOV because the recoil covers up the target, making it impossible to see anything. As I said at the beginning, opinions on Crimson can be similar to Last Word, because it might be an S-tier weapon for a controller player, but it might be like a B-tier weapon for a mouse and keyboard player. So, all things considered, Crimson is staying here in the S-tier for controller players and heading down to the B-tier for mouse and keyboard. Traveler's Chosen will build up its buff with final blows, and each stack massively improves your reload, handling, and aim assist. This will basically just buff the weapon and make it feel really snappy and amazing to use, but then you can also decide to consume the stacks. Ideally, you do this when your abilities are on cooldown because it gives you melee, grenade, and class ability energy. If you have literally any build that depends a lot on abilities, Traveler's Chosen is a great addition that will simply get you those abilities more often. And on top of that, the Catalyst gives you surplus, making the weapon even more insane when your abilities are charged up. The base weapon also just has a nice stat package overall, and it's clearly one of the most dominant sidearms out there. The king of exotic pulse rifles, though, is definitely the No Time to Explain, a weapon with fantastic stats and an extremely cool set of exotic perks that work in tandem. You begin by charging up the perk by hitting headshots, and then after 10 stacks, a small portal will open on the left side of your screen. Bullets will travel through the portal from an alternate timeline and do some pretty notable damage to your enemy, assisting this weapon's already deadly damage output. This is amazing because the portal will fire instantly when it detects an enemy, meaning that you will almost always get the first shot in the engagement. It also acts like a personal warning alarm telling you that enemies are nearby. This weapon did get a nerf and is now slightly harder to use, but the nerf didn't really have a big impact and it's still an outstanding weapon deserving of a spot here in the S tier. Duality is a slug and pellet shotgun hybrid. It fires a spread in hipfire mode, but a single pellet while aiming. Duality is really amazing because it allows you to react fast and hipfire close by opponents, or aim down sights and slug shotgun more distant opponents. This makes it perhaps the most versatile shotgun in the game, and it can pair nicely with a variety of primary weapons. Now that shotguns have fixed pellet spreads, Duality is actually one of the farthest reaching and most consistent spreads in the entire game. Featuring 95 range and 80 handling, it has the right stats to excel in shotgun combat. Its other perk grants extra precision damage and a massive reload speed buff, further adding to the versatility of this weapon. It feels very natural to just hipfire for spread or aim for slug, and thus it has rightfully secured its place as the third best exotic shotgun in the game. We have now made it to the SS tier, the level for super special exotics. These are hands down the most effective weapons in the game, and they're so insanely good that many people call them overpowered. They stand head and shoulders above the competition. Truly mastering these weapons will make you the most dangerous PvP player in the match. Well, unless someone else happens to be using these weapons too. Everyone loves wiping out an entire team with a single shot, and that is the specialty of Cloudstrike, the best sniper in the game. Even after a nerf to its explosion radius, this thing continues to dominate the Crucible with its massive lightning bolts and storms that wipe out huge groups of opponents. It's great for zapping a lot of people on an objective or someone trying to get a revive in Trials. This thing will get accidental collaterals like every game as well, so it really does feel like every time you shoot, you have a high chance of getting a random free elimination. Or maybe even 5 free eliminations. Although the collaterals are extremely satisfying, Cloudstrike can be slightly difficult to use because it doesn't have the best stat package. However, the Catalyst is the notable exception here because it bumps the handling up by 25, making the weapon feel very snappy. Of course, this is very important for snipers, so this is one of the reasons why Cloudstrike has become so dominant. It is overall one of the most fun weapons to use, and it has limitless potential for those who master it. Conditional Finality is by far the best shotgun in the entire game. There is literally no competition. This thing is just outright better than literally everything else. It's very good at just being a shotgun, but the special sauce really comes in when it faces off against supers. If you land most of the pellets in stasis mode, it will freeze the target. If you land most of the pellets in solar mode, it will ignite them. These two exotic functionalities just decimate every super in the game, even full health titans sitting inside their bubbles. It's just incredible to watch. There has never been a weapon this effective at taking down supers. But the stasis and solar effects are useful beyond just the super shutdowns. Since they synergize with basically everything on your subclass, they can lead to some big sprees if multiple opponents are close by. Handling is an extremely important stat for shotguns, and this weapon knocks it out of the park with 95 handling. You can easily swap to your primary to finish off a distant opponent, or conversely swap to your shotgun to take care of a nearby opponent. There are a few checkboxes that you absolutely must fill if you want to have a good hand cannon, and Ace of Spades checks them all, and then some. Although it has received a few nerfs over the years, you can never go wrong with this weapon. Its exotic perk will give you extra damage bullets if you reload following a final blow, and those bullets last forever. You can literally get a final blow, walk around doing nothing for 2 minutes, and then still have a massive advantage in the next engagement you see. There are very few perks in this game that can be extended over such a long time. Memento Ace hits extremely hard, and the bonus damage is great for making it more forgiving and for stacking with other damage buffs. In particular, the Radiant Hunter dodge is an insane combo here that lets you 2-tap. Ace also keeps your radar on screen at all times, which is just another fantastic buff to increase your awareness and stay alive. It also has Firefly to give you those big explosions on final blows. Ace just does so many things right that it is hard to find any weaknesses at all. People used to say that Ace's only weakness was its airborne accuracy, but nowadays Ace can be just as good as any legendary hand cannon in the air. It's an all-around top-tier hand cannon, and there's a good reason it has been a constant force in the PvP meta for years. It's actually kind of crazy that Le Monarque has been nerfed so many times, and yet somehow it's still this good and this popular. Even though it deals less damage now, the important part is the draw time. This bow can now spam poison arrows faster than ever before. And the more poison arrows you shoot, the more rage you will create inside your opponents. The poison is just devastating and keeps your opponents out of combat for a really long time. In a competitive situation, this will literally make you win games. The delayed shield regeneration forces your opponents to play slowly and heal, which gives you plenty of time to go after their teammates. The ticking damage numbers can also tell you where they are and help you chase them down while they are still low, giving you a ridiculously free elimination. On top of everything, the poison can spread, the bow has amazing stats, and with snapshot sights too, this weapon is just amazing all around. It will probably never go back to dealing as much damage as it did in the past, but Le Monarque is still a poison-spreading monster, and it's one of the greatest weapons in high-end PvP. The Chaperone is another monster of a weapon, but its specialty is one-shotting people at very long range. In fact, it's the only other exotic sniper competing with Cloudstrike. Its main perk grants bonus handling, range, and precision damage after you get a precision final blow. Even after the nerf to this perk, Chaperone still absolutely maps people. With a maxed out ranged bar, absurdly generous aim assist, and very fast handling, it's easily one of the best weapons in the game. No other slug shotgun comes anywhere close to its phenomenal stat package. I think it's pretty clear that conditional finality is a bit better all things considered, but that doesn't stop Chaperone from being an absolutely amazing option with plenty of strengths of its own. There's not really any debate here. Teroba is the best exotic SMG in the game. Now, there are definitely some legendary SMGs up there as well, but none of them match the uniqueness and terror that this weapon is capable of. Its main exotic perk makes it store up power when dealing or receiving damage, and then once your power is full, you can hold the reload button to unleash the beast. This lets you shred through anything in the game in 0.33 seconds. Guys, 0.33 seconds. There's literally nothing that comes anywhere close to that. The most remarkable thing about that number is that this is the body shot time. It's nearly twice as fast as Last Word, and Last Word requires you to hit all headshots. But with Teroba, you can just walk around taking out everybody's kneecaps because hitting headshots doesn't deal any more damage than body shots. Another really notable thing about this weapon is the perk is focused on the damage you deal and receive, and not on final blows. So if you're in a standoff exchanging occasional shots, you can land no final blows and then still unleash the beast and melt someone in a third of a second. This is fantastic for literally every mode, but it especially dominates in Rumble. I think a lot of people might have written this thing off after it got a nerf, but it is still insane. But it is not as insane as Thorn. With the Catalyst introducing a significant 15 range, 5 stability, and 5 airborne effectiveness, this is exactly what Thorn needed to shoot to the very top of the meta. Just like Le Monarque, Thorn deals burn damage that prevents people from re-entering combat and forces them to regenerate for longer. But in the case of Thorn, the poison is just the very beginning. If you defeat an enemy and then pick up their remnant, Thorn gains the ability to 2-tap any subsequent opponents. And when you do this, the Catalyst also grants even more bonus range, mobility, and handling for a short time. In the past, Thorn's #1 weakness was having subpar range, but with the Catalyst more than solving this issue, Thorn is now unstoppable. It is unbelievably dominant right now, and perhaps its greatest strength is that it doesn't really have a counter. No matter what you do, it is very difficult to outplay this weapon. It has very high handling, great aim assist, and it's solid in every other stat. It checks all of the boxes just like Ace, and Thorn now rules the Crucible once again. Let me tell you about something pretty interesting. Many exotics have secret exotic perks, like they do not show up in the game. These are completely hidden and 99% of players don't even know they exist. But don't worry, I explained all of the hidden exotic perks for you right here in this video, so go check it out to learn more. I want to give a huge shout out to my team for all their work on this video. It is the longest we've ever published to this channel, and it took a lot of work to test, research, record, and edit all 85 exotics into a single video. If you watched to the end, you're a legend, and I will see you next time.